In Sorry Baby, we examine the character of Agnes and her relationships in the years following a traumatic event. This one is a non-linear indie drama with a small dose of comedy. It's very intimate and features a couple of truly show-stealing scenes. Let's take a look. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I don't know if I can do a quote for this one. It's very serious.
I'm sure there's innocent enough quotes. I mean, maybe that doesn't all sound good as a sound bite, but I mean, technically it's someone, I think at some point says hello.
Oh, and I remember a moment. Very innocent. I got a cat.
There you go. That's innocent. So yes, welcome to the show, everyone. This is a movie podcast. We are doing a season of 2025 films, particularly films that have got good acclaim or good buzz from last year. And today we are looking at a film called Sorry Baby. And that's what we'll talk about. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you one before we get into the spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. Helps out a bunch if you do. And you can support this show and all of our other shows over in Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So Sorry Baby is a drama comedy, because I mean, obviously it feels weird to call it a comedy, but there is definitely a bit of comedy mixed in there. And it's about a young woman who goes through something traumatic. The film's told a little bit out of order, and it's kind of mostly about kind of the different chunks of time after the incident of her coping and how she interacts with others and that kind of thing. And I'm being kind of vague. I feel like when I read a description of this movie and it was as vague as what I just read, I did immediately make a guess as to what the thing was, and I was right. Yeah. So I don't think it's something, I'm not going to spoil it, but I also don't think that you're probably going to take that much effort to guess what it is. But
I think just reading the IMDb synopsis, there are two options that spring to mind, and as soon as the movie starts, you immediately get which one it is.
Yeah, it's not exactly a huge shock, but anywho, that's what we're going to talk about, and we'll get into it. So this is what I just discovered because I was looking up a bunch of best of lists and seeing kind of what was getting acclaim. It's not one that I actually kind of stumbled onto by chance. Am I right in assuming that you hadn't really seen anything about this?
Nothing, not a damn thing. I mean, we'll get into the people in it, but I feel like I Googled the director / writer, Ava Victor, and I feel like I may have seen a little bit of her like comedy on social media and stuff like that, because she has a little bit of a profile there. She seemed familiar, but the movie itself, no, I don't know a damn thing about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the starting point, is that she is the director. It's her directorial debut. I think she directed some episodes of a show that she was also heavily, I mean, her name's literally in the title of the show. But this is her first movie, and she's writing, directing, starring, and hey, that's a lot to take on. That's a hefty amount, especially when you're tackling something that gets as maybe emotionally raw as this kind of does in a couple of points. So, and interesting to see from that perspective as well. But yeah, I mean, we'll get some impressions. We'll see how we both feel, and talk around things a little bit before we go into the more spoilery stuff. So, David, what did you think of Sorry Baby?
I really like it. I think that out of all the movies we've done so far for this season, it has been, I don't want to say, it's felt very professional, I guess is the way to do it. It feels very much like these are the ones that are very large scale productions, more or less. The ones that feel like they are a bit more heavy effort put into them. This one feels a lot more indie. It feels a lot smaller. It feels very much like a directorial debut sort of thing. But it also feels a lot more personal. It feels like it's a very specific individual story. I have no idea of knowing whether or not it's true, but it feels like it has that very personal touch to it. I think the major thing that shines through in this is the acting. I think, of course, that is the center point of most all of this. And I appreciate that in this movie, given the scenario, given the issues that come up, it is very easy to fall into a level of drama / melodrama. The overexerting of emotions than making them very big and very bold and on screen and in your face. I appreciate how reserved this one is and how it does feel like just a period of this person's life and how she's making do and how she's getting through everything here. I guess if I have any like little minor critiques is that I don't feel like there was a major build. It didn't feel like we were like building to anything. Like I said, it does feel like just a period of a person's life, and life doesn't make narrative sense. Like it doesn't follow a narrative structure. So it kind of works in that regard. But when the movie was done, I did kind of feel wanting for more a little bit. Not in exactly a great way, in more of a, oh, okay, I guess we're just done with that now. So overall, it's a great start to this director's career, acting career as well. I don't know how much she's acted before this, but great entry at least. So yeah, it's a solidly made movie, and I would definitely give content warnings, but I can't say anything without spoiling things. So just be aware of that going into it.
Yeah, I think the direction's very strong. I think for me, the way it handles certain moments is kind of the it feels weird to say, the centerpiece almost of this to me is how it handles certain moments and how it portrays something as simple as camera work of just like sticking on a shot or just what it chooses to show or not show. That's the stuff for me that was really kind of firing on all cylinders. I think there's some nice setup and payoffs in some of the story, and obviously there is kind of a nuanced look and kind of like how she's like coping with stuff. The character, I think, is unique in a lot of ways, and I appreciated a lot of those touches. I will say though, I do have one kind of thing that I didn't like that much, and that is maybe a little bit of basically the comedy elements.
Okay. Yeah.
And not all of it per se, but like there was definitely some dialogue and just some like we're being kind of quirky in the moment stuff that I wasn't really clicking with, and I was almost feeling like I kind of want this to be more serious if I'm honest. Like
Yeah.
I'm not really. There's a couple of there's a scene almost that feels like right out of I don't know, like
I was thinking Judd Apatow. I was getting some like Judd Apatow sort of comedy vibes.
Oh sure, I mean, anything where there's a scene where like I you could even say The Office on. I mean, obviously that'd be more wacky, but like just in the idea that you go to meet, say like the scene I'm thinking of in this case is with a doctor, and I'm just thinking this scene with the doctor, like this is out of a comedy, and I feel like the tone is clashing with how I'm like feel like I was so into like what was happening for the last like 15 minutes of the movie, and then this sort of caught up with me, and I'm like, oh, I'm not really liking how this scene feels. And there's some quirky dialogue here or there, and there's one character who I never liked the entire movie. There's like a friend character who's like kind of mean called Natasha. I thought like she was so over the top and how like weird and quirky and like intense she was that I never like. I was like, this feels like a movie that's supposed to be like so grounded, and she feels like a movie character to me.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think that that's intentional for her character of like definitely not liking her, and like I don't think she's supposed to be a character that it's not in the way of like, oh, I love to hate this character. It's hate in the way of like a baby crying, where it's like, no, just please go away. I don't want you to be around anymore. Yeah, I get where you're coming from with that, but I wouldn't say it feels too much like a movie character. It does strike me more of just an exaggerated character in a little bit of a way. Like this is a caricature of somebody who could actually exist.
It's because to set her up by saying, oh, she's got like kind of like a mean look on her face all the time. You're basically saying she's got resting bitch face, I guess, is to put it in like, common parlance. But so the first time it cuts to her face, and she's just sort of like got the sort of scowl, and there's like she always has that look in her face. I'm like, this is goofy. Like this feels unnatural, and it just doesn't. Given how natural the rest of the movie
My wife is currently rewatching The Office, and like 100% when she popped up, I'm like, oh, this is Jan. Like this is absolutely Jan from The Office, where she's just constantly in that mood.
Yeah. So like that for me was a bit of a sticking point, especially, and I think that the problem with it as well is that it's not like it's relegated to one part. Like, I thought, oh, we're kind of done with that stuff. Great, we can just focus on the good stuff. And then it would kind of like pivot back into it at a couple of key points where I'm like, it's never quite let it go for me. And it's a shame because it kind of like, I'll go like 20 minutes of just being like, oh, this is really good stuff, and it's really well directed, and it's well done, and so on. But then like some of these elements will, and to be fair, even the main character is not completely immune to having occasionally a little bit of dialogue that feels a little bit like quirky indie movie, which was almost taking me out of the more realism of like the situation she's like going through and how well it was tackling those ideas.
See, like, I agree with you. I think I could have stood to have a little bit less of the indie quirkiness, but when it comes to the comedy beats, that's kind of what I appreciate about it, is that this does feel very real to the situation, where like it happens, yes, but then as like life continues on, like you're going to continue to have these other moments, and like even if you know, from a movie perspective, it's only been like 2 minutes and the audience needs time to recover. From a life perspective, it may have been like 2 or 3 days, and it's something where you're going to have a funny moment. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not you're ready for it or not. And I don't know, I kind of like the sort of disparity between those two. The whiplash feels almost intentional in a way.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, is that you can say that about any story ever. You can say, well, it's realistic that these are things would be happening, but they just don't choose to put it in certain movies because it would get in the way of the pacing or the tone or whatever you want to call it. And I guess maybe part of it is I just don't think the comedy stuff's that funny. So so for me, it was just kind of dragging me out a little bit when that stuff was coming up, because it's a shame. It's a shame because like I think everything else is really strong. Like, you know, there's a point in this movie where like it hinted at some things in the first like 20 minutes or so, right? But I wasn't as into that first chunk, and then it got into like, you know, because it's actually in chapters. The movies actually literally get chapter titles that come up, and when it gets into the second chapter, like the teases in the first chapter did actually set me up quite well, where I was like really paying attention to certain details and things, and I was like, oh, this is building a sense of discomfort and so on in a really smart way, and it handled everything expertly and so on. So that's good, that's great. And I was like, so at this point I'm like super invested in what's happening, and we were into it, and then it felt like, you know, almost too quickly afterwards it just sort of veered back into like, you know, what was in that first chunk, and I don't know, like that for me, and this is maybe purely a taste thing, where just some of the quirkiness of the specific way that the characters are written just was clashing with how much I liked everything else.
Oh yeah, no, I have no idea if this is a good or a bad thing to say, but there were periods throughout this movie where like pretty much every character that came on screen, I was questioning, like, are they supposed to be represented as like some level of autistic? Like, is there supposed to be some weirdness here? Because the way that they deliver the stuff is very, again, it reminded me of Judd Apatow, where it's like, this is not typical movie presentation. This is not something where it is like someone giving a performance and it feels naturalistic but refined. It feels very much in this movie like, no, the awkwardness, the way that people speak with stiltedness, and like there's a bit of over talking with each other, there's a bit of awkward silences, and having like not seen that much in a lot of movies, like especially in this season, it's something that it feels like they're intentionally trying to make the characters feel like they're like missing social cues or anything like that. And I think that leads into the same sort of thing you're saying with the humor, is that it does play a lot of that sort of awkward, not quite cringe humor, but yeah, The Office, that sort of stuff where you're laughing halfway with them, halfway at them, and the situations they get into.
Yeah, and the thing is though, is that I think that offbeatness and like missing the social cues actually works for the more dramatic parts, because it makes those feel raw, and it makes them feel real, and it makes them feel like, oh, this is genuinely like this character clearly is uncomfortable, or they're like not hitting the social cues, is clearly making the other person uncomfortable, and like those things really land. And like there's a couple of I think there's like 3 scenes in this movie that are phenomenal scenes that are like you know, examples of some of the best scenes in the last year of movies. But then some of the rest of the movie, I was finding myself going, it's dipping into more quirky indie territory now. And when I say quirky, it's not that quirky in terms of like, what it's doing in a story sense or anything. It's more just like, interactions and how the characters are speaking to each other, and so on. And it's so funny because obviously some of those scenes where there's a bit of comedy, it's obviously there's meant to be an element of like, well, we're pointing things out in the system that don't quite work. So the comedy's meant to be shining a light, it's satirical in a sense. But it wasn't quite working for me here. And what's so funny is I've been watching a lot of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia this past couple of weeks.
I think that might be the antithesis of this movie in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, but that's also very satirical. But that's satirical in a way that does constantly make me laugh in a very different sense. For me here though, like when it went into like a scene that was going more for comedy, and even though it was kind of making a point, I was almost at odds for me with the point it was making. Not because it was doing something wrong or offensive or anything like that, because I mean obviously It's Always Sunny is like doing offensive things because the characters are awful human beings, and that's the lens of which it tells all of its stories. Not in any way like that, but just at odds in terms of like my engrossment. Is that a word?
I think so, yeah.
My connection with like the story and like me engaging with it, because I'm trying to take this seriously because it feels serious. I feel like I want to take this seriously, and then like the character responds with something that's kind of for an awkward laugh or something like that, and I was kind of like, I don't know. I think this is a very interesting case of liking the point of the movie, the concept, the story, liking a lot of how it's handled from a cinematic point of view, but there's something about the script and the way some of the dialogue's written that maybe just isn't to my taste, and it's just like a little bit of a hurdle that I think is just going to ultimately like put a ceiling on where I'm going to score this at the end of the review, versus otherwise. And I feel just to wrap up here is like, because I think with what was the one I was a little bit closer to middle? It was Train Dreams, right? I think with that, yes. I was a bit more like, there's a lot of obviously beautiful things in this movie, but I had some critiques about how the story was told and so on. This one, like, is a little more frustrating, and that's not to say that I think it's weaker. I actually think it's stronger than Train Dreams, but it's more frustrating because the stuff that's great is really great, and I want to like sing its praises. I want to say that I love it. And there's this element of it that kept just kind of taking me out of it. So I just, No,
I get where you're coming from, because I definitely see the comedy aspect of this, because as much as it is I don't want to say tragedy, but as much as it is a serious drama, the comedy aspect makes up a significant portion. And if that's not working for you, and I can see places where it wouldn't, then I see this being filled with hurdles, filled with things that are absolutely not going to let you get to the ending. For me, I can see where the comedy gets a little bit too indie quirky for me, but ultimately I'm able to brush it aside because I just really like the way that we're taking this slow, thoughtful pace to this story and like letting it play out in such a realistic and, more importantly, not melodramatic sort of way. Like that, I think that's kind of the big thing for the movie for me that I am sticking with, is with where this movie starts, with the premise that it gives us, and we get to it, the inciting incident. I see how Hollywood, I see how that story would normally play out. And it's filled with the high emotion. It's filled with the melodrama. It's filled with like all these moments that you expect to happen. And yet this movie, at every single turn where it has the potential to go there, it purposefully goes the other way, but in a way that feels still very realistic, very true to life, and a way that like feels very personal. I have no idea if Ava Victor went through anything like this, but it feels very sincere and not like it's trying to lighten a bad situation by making it a comedy, but just portraying the realness of it.
Yeah. I wouldn't leap to the assumption that she necessarily has based this on anything. It may just be a very, very well thought out examination, because she's got some things to say. Maybe she knows someone who's went through something if she's not went through it herself. I don't know. But yeah, it does feel like a lot of the nuance points that are being made here are coming from a very well thought out place, and there's things to notice in here. There's things to examine and study. The movie's got a lot of good foreshadowing with little elements that it sets up thematically or otherwise. So that's something we'll get into in the spoilers here in a second as well. Music-wise, it's actually mostly devoid of music, to the point where when a song did kick in very late on, it was almost like a shock to the system. I'm like, oh, there's upbeat music playing. What's happening?
Yeah.
You know, so that's got impact because of that, and I think it's very purposely chosen to like be with it mostly without until that point. So yeah, so no, good. There's a lot of good creative choices made here for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Before we get too deep into it, I do want to mention Ava Victor, and seemingly the character herself of Agnes is somewhat gender fluid. They use she, her, and they, them profile or pronouns. So, you know, use she, her should be fine, but just be aware that they, them is also an option.
Okay. I mean, it makes it easier to have the the choice. But yeah,
I just went on to their Wikipedia page and they use they pronouns the whole time, and I was like, uh-oh, is this the thing? And then I googled further. I'm like, nope, okay, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise cast-wise, Naomi Akkie's in here, who I think I've seen pop up in one thing. She's like the best friend type character. John Carroll Lynch has got a small role in here. It's a very memorable role, though, for the one scene that he's in. So that was interesting seeing him pop up here. But yeah, that was, I think, for faces that I might have... Actually, I will say there is a character... there's an Asian actress in this who I definitely recognize from something, but I couldn't even tell you what, though, without looking it up.
Let me see here. She was in Hannibal. She was in 2 episodes of Last of Us.
That's probably the last thing I saw her in. But yeah, the actress we're talking about here is Hetien Park, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yep. 1 episode of Blacklist, 2 episodes of The OA. Like, she's been around in things that you've watched.
Yeah, she's just been bouncing around in a lot of TV shows by the sounds of it, and that's why I recognize her. So no, cool. Yeah, I think to get into the serious discussion, though, we have to go into spoilers to really talk about this one. Yeah. Sure. I think this is the point now where we will say spoilers for Sorry Baby from this point on. And if you're spoiled, then sorry, baby.
Yeah.
Well, so but I'm spoilers now. So what's so funny is that when I saw the title of this movie initially, up until I watched it, I did just assume the title meant "Sorry, Baby," as in you're calling someone baby.
Right.
Right. Someone's saying to their partner, "Sorry, baby." Obviously, by the ending, it's more literal than that. It's literally the movie's saying "Sorry, baby" to a baby, which is funny to me.
I mean, I was bouncing between that or the poster that I see associated with this on everything is the main character of Agnes holding a cat, and I was like, are we calling the cat baby? Is that the cat's name? And then we find out the cat is Olga, and I'm like, all right, guess not.
Yeah. So that's a movie about sexual assault, right? I mean, I think that's probably not like a leap. People are probably going to predict that, just based on the, just the vague premise just feels like it's leading to that direction. How far it goes, of course, how traumatic it is, the exact context all remains to be seen in the movie, but it's very much about that. And I do think the movie does something smart by starting the story after it's happened, like years after, right? The movie opens up, when Agnes has already got a teaching job at the university that she studied at, and the context of this first chapter is that her best friend Liddy, who she was in college with, is coming to visit for like a weekend. They've not seen each other in a few years, and it's all very about reconnecting, reminiscing, and it there's some subtle teases in that section of like how things are, especially towards the end when they have their little dinner party with the others that they knew from college, and that's where the real tease comes, because there's a very specific moment where the bitch character, if you will, Natasha, right, who and she is like confrontational and just like making comments about everything as far as she feels like, to the point where she's like, and later on we find out she wanted that teaching job, so there's maybe some jealousy in there, but she's like, oh, you got that position, you're the youngest, teaching staff at the university in the last like 50 years or something. And someone else says something, and then she goes, well, it's not my fault that she was Decker's favorite. And this is the moment where you see Agnes react. She goes quiet, but immediately, and I think this was the more telling reaction, is Liddy looks over at her with concern, and then you see her hand go under the table and hold her hand, and it immediately just like, oh shit, okay, yes, she was Decker's favorite, quote unquote. What does that mean? It sounds like someone gave her extra attention, and it's obviously a very sore subject to come up, and then immediately Liddy's trying to check if she's okay. And then the conclusion to this segment, just to sort of wrap the summary of this up, is that before she leaves, Liddy almost outright kind of tries to ask Agnes if she's thinking about killing herself. Right? She brings it up in a more friendly way, but it's like, hey, don't die, before I see you again,
Right. Well, that's what I like about this sequence. Like you said, it's smart that it started off further down the road, is that it almost sets the mood for the movie to let you know, like right off the bat, like, look, something is going to happen. It's going to be a thing. However, we're already seeing that this character is in a better place. They're not completely over it. It's not something that they are 100% like work their way through, but they have this job they're happy with. They have a friend. Liddy also announces at this point that she's pregnant, and it does feel like she was hesitant to say something about it, as if not to like trigger Agnes in some way that like maybe they wouldn't have foreseen happening. But Agnes takes it in stride. She's very excited about it. So I think it's very smart to start here and say, this is not a movie that is going to be like the tragedy. It's not going to be focusing on how awful this was and how debilitating it is. Like, she's able to push through it, and she's able to get out the other side. Maybe not whole, but at least better than people are expecting her to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm reading it as positively as you are. Like, I actually think this opening is quite sad, and like everything about.
No, it's sad. Yeah, that's why I'm saying not whole. Like, it definitely shows like it's setting you up as well. Like I said, something bad is going to happen, and that's where I think the next title card is the year with the bad thing. Like, it's absolutely giving you that pit in your stomach. Like, get ready for it.
Yeah, but I mean, the entire opening to me is like, even everything as they're reminiscing and they're outside and they're in the cold and they're talking. There's kind of a stiltiness to it. There's kind of it feels like, Liddy's concerned about Agnes, and then obviously the dinner scene and whatnot, but it feels like even before you get to the, don't die before next time, it does feel like Agnes is living kind of a lonely life. Liddy even says, do you ever go out? Do you do it? And she's like, yeah, I've got a job. But that the implication there being is that that's all she goes outside for, is to go to work. She's not necessarily living a life. So, like, I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think it's this like this oh, she's pushed through and like things are better, because I think a big part of this movie is that like this is something that sticks with you, and like coping with how that sticks with you is a big part of what the character is actually going to go through and talk about later on. So. Right.
To be clear, what you're saying, though, of like the, don't die and all that all happens after the dinner scene. I think that everything up to that point, you're saying stilted, I didn't get that. I think all that is positive. I think all that is showing like, she's still getting by all that. Once the dinner scene happens, that's where it starts doing the like brace for impact sort of stuff. It's setting you up of like, we're going to explore this. We're going to show that people are still like concerned about her. But also a big part of the movie is this idea that like, it's impacting her, but other people still have to live their lives. Like, other people are still moving on and leaving her essentially alone to deal with this.
I want to correct something there very important. Not people. Okay. One person knows what she's went through. The rest of the people at that table don't know. And I think that's actually part of why it feels so sad, is that she only has this one person who she can actually, even talk to about it, even not that they actually openly discuss it at any point, because they don't. And I actually like that about it, is that it is just that little hand-holding moment that tells you how close they are and so on. But I think I disagree that everything feels happy before that point, before the dinner scene. Okay. And it's not, and I'm not saying that it's like doom and gloom and it's really sad or anything, but there is kind of this like, maybe it's just because I've watched a lot of indie movies about people reconnecting. Like, every vibe of this, like them like hanging out, kind of felt like sad, like, oh, we don't really do this that much anymore. And it's like, she's made an effort to come and do this, but at the same time, the announcement that she's going to have a baby almost is like a signal that, oh, she's going to have even less time to come and see her in the future potentially. And that's not necessarily to say that will definitely be true, but it's like a potential worry if like Liddy's the only person she's really got in her life that she feels comfortable with, or is a rock to lean on. That, you know, Liddy's life is moving forward. She's in a relationship with another woman. She's got a baby on the way, and like that life keeps chugging along. And I think they're like, and again, I don't want to say it's like everything's depressing before that point, but I think there is an air of it's mainly a tone thing. Like the movie's tone was telling me that we're not like, you know, in a great place.
That's fair. I agree with you that I think that feeling is there, but I ascribe it to the scene where she's driving away and then like Agnes runs up to the car and is like, hey, but like for real, come back soon. Like I want to see you more frequently than we are. Like that felt very much like the disconnect is there and there is that sort of space where it feels like they're separate. But I think all the stuff beforehand, like they're just cracking jokes together. They're falling asleep on the couch together. Like it all felt very positive and upbeat for me right up until the dinner scene, essentially.
Yeah, now there's something under the surface, which is basically the subtext and what's going on said. It's like, and it's not nothing malicious. No one's, it's not like Liddy's pretending or going through the motions, but it does kind of feel like, oh, this is like the one snapshot of like having this again for a little bit, kind of thing. So, all right. But regardless, you know, this opening segment.
I was going to say, once we exit the sequence, we agree the feeling is the same, which is, yes. Oh no.
Yeah. For me, I guess I'm saying it was like a slow build throughout the entire thing, rather than just you get to the dinner scene, and for you, it was maybe more of a turn or more of a pivot.
I mean, it as soon as the dinner scene started, especially sitting there with resting bitch face, it definitely felt to me like, this is not going to be a good time. And then we get to see just how bad it is.
Yeah. So because we have this indication, and like there's like a couple of foreshadowing things in this opening chunk. One is that she falls asleep at one point and they're watching 12 Angry Men. This actually ends up, I didn't realize this would be foreshadowing, but there's some jury and court stuff later, which this was kind of like setting up, which is kind of neat. Two, when she is asleep, Liddy's like sort of snooping around and sees that, you know, one of the books she's teaching and like she's got like notes and post-its sticking out of is Lolita, which is also thematically very relevant because that's all about a man with this young girl who he's kind of grooming and so on, which is not exactly her story, of course, but the parallels are obviously there.
Yeah, it's something that would still be very triggering to someone in her situation.
And then the other thing is that we get introduced to Gavin, the neighbor. Can I just say, actually, I don't think I've ever heard of an American called Gavin. To me, that's such an English name.
I mean, I don't know any personally. I know it as a last name, but yeah, I don't think I know anybody with a first name of Gavin.
Yeah, that sounds like such an English name to me. I was weird. And because Liddy is English, Naomi Ackie, I assume she's really English in real life, so she's just playing an English character here. But So because I was actually questioning, because I don't know if they said like a location or whatever by this point in the movie. So because we had one American character and one English character, I was like, oh, which country are we in? I actually don't know. And then Gavin shows up and he's also American, and I'm like, oh, I guess we're in America. But the name Gavin for a second made me think we weren't. Yeah.
I mean, it is very heavily overcast. It could have easily have been Britain, but I think I'm not even sure I got it from the movie, but the Wikipedia page says that it's Maine. So.
Oh, Stephen King was involved in this? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's right next to Derry. Didn't you see Pennywise standing in the back of that long shot of the house?
I like the idea of going up to Eva Victor and saying, so Stephen King was involved, yes, because it's set in Maine. Like, we all know that something can only be set in Maine if Stephen King at least, like, did a little bit of a rewrite on it.
Yeah, no. Like, if you look up Maine's GDP, it's like 26% crops, but then like 74% Stephen King.
So that sets that up, and you know, it's almost like he was coming over to see her, and this is when Agnes wakes up and hears him at the door, and she kind of clearly is a little like embarrassed and like what says no like I've got company this weekend, and he's like, oh yeah, you must be the friend Liddy. Oh well, I'll just go. And as soon as she shuts the door, Liddy turns and says, oh, you're banging the neighbor, aren't you? And she denies it, of course, but it's like, yeah, he was clearly over here hopefully for a booty call or something. Like that's the vibe of it.
He's like, oh yeah, you're Liddy. Like he says, oh yes, you're Liddy, clearly having spoken with Agnes enough to know that a friend is coming over. But then as she gets to the door, he's like, Gavin, your house is over there. And he's like, oh, yeah, silly me. Bye.
Yeah. Which, you know, it is something that she wouldn't just admit to her friend, that she's having some sort of casual fling or whatever it may be with the neighbor. Not that Liddy gives. I mean, Liddy just sort of like says she's doing it and kind of like smiles and laughs. She doesn't care.
It's friendly light teasing. It's not something where it's like, it's not even from the viewpoint of like, okay, after you got through the assault, like, it's not even a thing where she's like applauding her, being like, you did it, you made it through, you've gotten to this point. It's just, haha, you're having sex with the neighbor. Yeah,
it's just friendly jostling. There's nothing else to it, but it's. But I do think it says something about Agnes, though, that she wouldn't just admit that this is happening, you know?
I mean, I would say that, especially it being the neighbor, it being someone who's around, and you have this friend who you're close with, but ultimately you have been apart from for so long. This isn't the thing that you would just openly volunteer the information. I feel like I understand that.
Sure. Yeah, but to the point where you're trying to pretend that he's just went to the wrong house by accident, like, that's a bit of a cover story.
I mean, that's probably just the very first thing that came to mind. She's just like, yeah, hey, anyway.
Okay. Anyway, we'll come back to him later. He's got more stuff in other chapters. But so yeah, there's a few things set up here, which is nice. But obviously, I think the most memorable chapter of the movie, though, is the second chapter, because that's the chapter where we go through the incident, where we get a few interactions with this Professor Decker, where he's got the study group, or his little class, and
I think that he's like an advisor to people getting their PhDs.
Yeah.
Like they're all writing their theses, and he's just advising them.
Yeah, and there's actually some really nice callbacks to some of this stuff later on as well. But you know, like, he's asking them all like if they've, you know, finished their thesis, and Liddy's not quite done hers yet. Whereas Natasha is like, I've done mine. Are you going to read it? Are you going to? And he's like, of course I'm going to read it. That's my job. Like, it's literally my job to read this. And then she's like, aren't you going to ask Agnes if she's done hers? And he's like, of course I am. It's like, all right.
Okay, so this is the sequence where I'm like, okay, look, I've gotten used to the way that Agnes talks and like everything else there. I don't think that Agnes is particularly like on the spectrum or anything, but you can't tell me Natasha isn't. Like 100%, there's a little bit going on there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what they're going for here is that clearly there's some kind of flirtation happening between Decker and Agnes, and it's something that others can see. So obviously, in the more blunt way, Natasha's making these little digs of like, aren't you going to, why are you giving her special treatment? You know, she's like getting jealous and making these little digs and comments. On the flip side, her friend Liddy later on that night is like, hey, do you want to bang the professor? And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure he wants to bang you. And, you know, they sort of talk about it a little bit, and, you know, it's mostly jokey, but Agnes does say, no, I would say no. Like, I'd say thank you, but no.
This is also just after she got a text from the professor, like, applauding her writing in her thesis, saying, like, this is extraordinary, it's fantastic.
Yes, effusive praise. And then he sets up a meeting in his office to, like, basically go over the thesis, but then he gets called away because his ex-wife and his kid or something. But notably, he is saying it's exceptional, it's extraordinary. He's saying all these things. He gives her a first edition of a book to read. He's like, hey, look at this. Like, oh, you like this? And he rushes off, and it's like, okay, nothing too, I mean, obviously, there's all the praises there, but nothing too problematic in that scene.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't feel untoward or anything. It still feels to a level appropriate.
Then the next time she goes, though, to see him at his office, knock on the door, he's not there. She gets a text. Oh, he's and we don't actually see or hear this. We just see her react to a text, and she starts walking. Turns out he lives, like, you know, 2 minutes from this building. Like, his house is like right next to the campus. So she just walks across a couple of roads, gets to his house, and goes in, and it's, you know, it's very like, oh, could you take your boots off, please? And she's like, oh, yeah, sure.
He specifically says like, hey, don't worry, my kid's not here. You don't got to worry about that. Take your boots off. And I don't know what moments you think are like the fantastic moments of this movie.
Oh, this is one of them.
Sequence.
No,
yeah, absolutely.
No question. It's the best sequence in the whole movie, right? Because it doesn't go in the house. The camera just stays on this wide shot. The door shuts. We sit there in silence for a good, 10, 15 seconds. and then it snaps forward to like maybe a few hours later where it's kind of getting dark, but not really dark yet. And it sits in that for another 15, 20 seconds. Then it snaps forward, and now it's pitch black outside. It's dark. The lights are on in the house. We sit for 15, 20 seconds, whatever length of time is. My seconds might be off here, but you know what I mean? You get this feeling. Yeah.
You feel like you're sitting there. You feel like time is passing.
Yeah. And because it's set it up so well where you know there was an incident, you know this is something that's traumatized or based on the interactions earlier, you feel it in your gut the entire time. And it's almost more powerful because we don't see it. We just see the house. And this idea that he's lured her over to his private residence where there's no one else around and he can try something. And eventually the door opens and it's her holding her boots in her hand and kind of shuffling down. I think one of my favorite things, when I say like this is like the best thing in the movie, I don't just mean the shot of the house. I mean everything following her to the car and then the car ride home. All of that is perfect because
it does a great job of, because we haven't seen anything, your mind fills it in. We know what happened, but we don't know how it happened, and so you're left with this like fear of how bad it may have been. But then this long walk, the long drive,
notably when she's walking back to the car, which it follows in real time. There's no cuts ahead. We've watched this walk all the way back. Most of it is from behind her. So we actually hide her face. So even when she's come out of the house and it was such a wide shot, you couldn't really see her face. So you can't see her look upset or disheveled or whatever. And we cut to the shot behind her, walking behind her, and like you don't see her face the entire time. So you're still in this sort of mystery of like, again, you can make an educated guess. You understand that something bad has probably just happened, but we're at like we're being kept at like a length away from her, so that we're not in her head yet.
Yeah, and then like again with the not cutting, this whole sequence top to bottom of like when she walks into the house all the way to when she gets back to her own house takes in real time like 4 to 5 minutes. Like it's just silence of you dealing with this and you coming to like, much like the character itself, like you're kind of just slowly getting past the shock and realizing like this just happened, and you're left to sit with it. There's nothing else to distract you during any of these sequences until finally she gets back home, she talks to her roommate, and then we finally get the
not to cut ahead too much because there's more stuff that's great in this sequence.
Absolutely.
The first time we see her face, I think, is when she turns around looking behind her as if she's almost like heard a noise or something and is worried that maybe she's been followed or she's the paranoia, and it's not unjust paranoia, but that's the best word for it, settles in. And when she does get in the car, and we do actually keep on her face because we're watching from the front now, like she every so often you see her eyes go up to the mirror to check, like, is there anyone else? Like there is this feeling of not being safe the entire time on this, and it's just nothing exciting happens in the car ride. It's just watching her act as she drives for an extended minute of time, and then of course we have her arriving home and the roommates there.
Now maybe this is me taking an extra step too far, but like for half of her drive home there are bright headlights of a car behind her, and for me I was paranoid that whole time of like, is that someone? Like, are we actually going to go the distance here?
Yeah, I think it wants you to contemplate that, and I think ultimately it's not anything dangerous. It's just a car behind her, but this idea that you're with her and she's in this state where she is being extra now careful and sensitive and looking over her shoulder. It's
the same sort of thing from like It Follows, where like they set up the fact that it could be anybody, and then you look and anybody is now the fear of it. Yeah,
really, really well done. And then obviously, when she comes in to the house, like very quickly, Liddy, sees that something's not right, that something's not quite, going on.
And like she doesn't see it immediately. Like Agnes is in the other room. Thank God she kept it PG, because if she was just like, oh, you spent an extra long time over at the professor's place, she's just like, no, hey, I've been waiting for a while. How's it go? Like that's all she says. And then she looks up and sees Agnes and it's like, okay, something's wrong.
Yeah, and then we get this extended sequence with her sitting in the bathtub, and she's telling Liddy, describing the events of what happened. And notably, we stay on Agnes's face. I mean, it does eventually start doing shot, reverse shot, but it does stay on her face for the first half of this scene, give or take, as she's describing the events of what happened. And Yeah, and it is. I think this is something I've seen done in other movies actually, particularly with this very subject. Actually, is the idea of the tragedy and the horror of the event itself is something the character goes through, but it's kept from the audience because it's meant to mirror this idea that someone who's went through this type of event, like, yeah, other people can listen to you, other people can like hear what happened and sympathize, but they'll never actually have went through it. And then for some people, they might never tell anyone, so it's something that only they will ever live with and never actually, get off their chest. So it's very much a tactic here to have this be told to the roommate, to Liddy, and we're Liddy here. We're her hearing her story and what happened here in detail, step by step of what went on in that house. So
yeah. I also, I mean, just to move on to specifically like what she was talking about, like, I think that I really appreciate that this movie doesn't make it this whole big violent thing. It doesn't make it this whole, like, the stereotypical when you think of like the first thing that comes to mind when it says sexual assault. It's not that. It is something that feels a lot more benign. It feels a lot smaller in scale, but it is still absolutely that.
I think that's kind of the point, I think, and why they've chosen these events specifically, is that it's this idea of this is not some shadowy figure that jumped out of like an alleyway and like grabbed someone and just violently attacked them. This is someone who, and as she tells the story, she's saying, oh, we were talking about the thesis and stuff, and then we kind of just skipped to like, oh, there was some kissing that started, but she kind of pulled away from that, and she said she didn't want to do that, and he's like, okay, let's just watch a movie. So it's like, oh, we're going to sit down on the couch and watch a movie. It's in this very homely environment where he seemingly is respecting what she's just said and doing a normal human thing that everyone does every day. But then he just keeps making moves. He just keeps putting his hand somewhere, while they're watching the movie. Just keeps, obviously ultimately forcing himself on her is where it's going.
Yeah,
but
he doesn't, it's not even that I don't think there's any point in this where she like specifically says that she says no, but he's not respecting the fact that she has not given consent. Like she keeps on trying to wriggle out of things, but he's not seeing that as a no in his eyes. Yeah,
she keeps, the exact thing she describes is that he keeps putting his hand, on her thigh and then eventually like, into her jeans and her underwear and stuff. And she keeps saying that every time, at least the first 2 or 3 times, she kept taking his hand and putting it away, like which is pretty clear what that's saying from a consent point of view. And she does it multiple times, but then it just kept happening more. And she describes how how almost hurt and how bad it felt, and so on. And there is almost this kind of sense of like the way the dialogue's written here is very good, because the way she describes it does give this sense of like the shock value of like, oh, like all of a sudden, like the trousers were being like pulled down. And I was, and because she doesn't really describe it as if, she was frantically fighting back and trying to pull them up. She just sort of says, I kept pulling them back up. And it almost sounds like very calm compared to what you imagine in your head. Now, maybe it wasn't as calm as that. Maybe she's like, maybe she was in shock in the moment, so it was weirdly calm relative to what you would imagine. Or maybe it was more frantic and she's just kind of processing it way in her head,
I mean, it's the way that they play this scene, obviously it's very personal because we are just holding on her face, but the way she's describing it feels so removed. Like it feels like, the aspects, the event itself is almost like secondhand. Whereas the things that she's focusing on, like at one point she goes on just like the short little tangent, but she's basically saying like, yeah, he was trying to pull down my pants and, there's that button there and like the button was still up and like he couldn't get my pants down because of the button. And she like really focuses on that button for a while. Like that's the thing that she locked onto, basically just out of shock from all the rest of it.
Yeah, and she basically talks about the moment where she just, because I think, where the way she was telling it, I wasn't even necessarily sure sort of the position of the two people, in the scene, right? So when she said that she then felt something, and obviously she's talking about his penis, actually being inside her at this point, I was like, I didn't realize we were at kind of a position where that might happen yet. But I don't think it's a mistake in the movie's part. I think it's very intentional that the way she's telling it's a little bit fragmented because she's struggling to process it herself.
Yeah, like especially during this part, especially during like the absolute worst of it. Like this is the part where she may have like fully dissociated, might have just completely separated out for a while.
And notably as well, I you know, it's a simple touch, but the fact that she's saying all this as she's naked in a bath, which you never see anything. It's very much just her face. You know, it's just very tasteful and all that. But the idea that she's vulnerable, she's completely stripped and vulnerable, bearing what happened to her, to the person she trusts. You know, it's all very visually symbolic of what's actually happening here in the scene itself. So, yeah, and you know, and it's, you know, that was like, you know, she kind of pulled away, and you know, it sounds like we picked up from right after that where she went and grabbed her boots, kind of just pulled her clothes up. And
she specifically said that like as soon as it like she got up, she pulled herself up, and then she like sat on the edge of the couch for a while.
Oh,
and
sorry,
like,
yeah. There's a little pause first, yeah.
Like she just like occasionally looked over at him, and she specifically mentions like the look on his face was not a look of like satisfaction. It wasn't a look of anything like that. It was fear. He was scared, and I feel like you get from that description the idea that like he kind of realizes what he did in that moment as well. Like he never thought that he was that kind of person, and then this happened, and it informs then exactly what he does following this sequence as well.
Yeah. Maybe it's the first time, or maybe it's like, maybe it is something that he's slipped and done multiple times, but you know, this is kind of like, you know,
we don't know why he has an ex-wife, but
yeah.
Who knows?
But either way, it does paint a little bit of a picture of how he's reacting to it, and then obviously she says that she picked up her boots and left. And I love some of these details because, you know, when she later on, when she's at home, she hates looking at those boots because those are the boots that she had to grab on the way out of the house. So she like puts them in a bag and shoves them in the closet, and it's like, oh, away from sight, I can't look at those. Just little things like that. I thought were really good details of like how how again, like you were saying about her focusing on the button in the story, because it's just such a small detail, but that's what she was thinking about in the moment. And now she's looking at these boots, and these boots just represent that night now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that's kind of what I appreciate the most. As we continue through the movie, you get to see how this isn't a thing where she processes it all at once. This is a thing where she takes tiny little steps, like little things that she's hidden away in order to keep it out of sight. There are things that she keeps up in order to remind her. Like there's all these different things that she eventually moves past and gets to a much better point, but obviously still not the whole that she was beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, I think even at the end of the movie, she's not like, you know, magically cured, everything's happy now, happily ever after. Right. It's not that. It's very much of a, no, bad things happen, and you know, all we can do is listen to each other when those bad things happen and try and help. But like, it's not, you know, this, you know, perfect Hollywood ending, you know, ends on this kind of cold note of her speaking to a baby, saying, sorry, baby, but bad things are going to happen to you someday, and I hope they don't. Like, I if I can protect you, I will, but they might happen to you anyway.
I mean, if we're just talking about that, like, I specifically like the bit where she's talking to the kid, and it's just like, look, I can't say good things are going to happen. Like, there are going to be bad things that happen, but what I can say is that you can always talk to me about it. This idea that like that is what she sees as the most important aspect, is being able to like know that someone else is there and have someone, because that if you are truly alone, like that's the hardest way to get through that.
Yeah. So no, I mean, honestly, like the text to go over to his house and realizing, even the scenes before to some extent, although some of the awkward comedy shit I don't like is mixed in with those because the other characters are there, but like all of the build up, and then like the coming out the house, the drive home, the telling of what happened, all of that is exceptional. Like, it's so well handled from a filmmaking perspective, from a writing perspective. The performance is very good, so you know, it's full marks on that. But then we go to the hospital for the next scene, and this is one of my least favorite scenes of the whole movie.
This is exactly the type of scene that makes me feel like it is a personal story, because in the context of the movie, it feels so outlandish that like I couldn't accept that it was just written that way, you know? Like, I feel like it had to have been something that like to some extent actually happened. Surely this is characterized, but like you know, I have to assume this was just a little bit of a personal story, or at least something that she heard.
I don't know. This is not the part that feels personal to me. This feels like the movie scene to me, as opposed to the other stuff. So I don't get that vibe at all. And yeah, so the thing is the point of this scene I like, because the point of this scene is that Liddy's taking her to the doctor to get checked out, you know, as a victim of assault, and, you know, for STDs, things like that. And the point, of course, is that this doctor is very cold and clinical and doesn't really consider her feelings all that much. And if anything, he kind of chastises her for going home and getting showered, because they could have done like forensic testing and stuff if she hadn't. And you know, Agnes kind of fires back with, "I'll keep that in mind next time." And I'm like, that's a bit quippy. I don't know if I'm liking the quips in this scene. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet on the next day. But yeah, the point of the scene is that, like, this doctor, like, the lack of emotion from him, the fact that he's just kind of treating it like another patient, and there's nothing personal there. He's not, like, considering her feelings, the way he's speaking to her, the way he's acting. I get the point of it, but it's played for this awkward kind of, like, you know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's the reaction of the two girls, and it's just a bit quippy there. I appreciate what they were doing with the doctor, and just to mildly tack on with what you're saying is that I appreciate that he is following the script. Like, that's the thing, is like when he first walks in, he does specifically clear with her, like, do you feel comfortable now? Like, is this a thing where like he's following the words that he's supposed to say, but it literally is all in his tone that leads to this insensitivity of it. It leads to this feeling of like, I know that you're like instructed to say these things, but you need to have a little compassion, and it needs to change up for like the individual itself. Like, how are they needing this to be? But yeah, no, I do agree with you that this is probably the most quippy that it feels, and having it so close after the very heartfelt and like 20-minute long segment where it's just firing on all cylinders, it feels a bit weird. It does kind of feel like this is an out of place sequence.
Yeah, it was this scene, and then the scene that's not too far after this, where she sits down with the two like administrators or whoever they are from the university, because she has, you know, reported it to staff, and I wasn't sure if she was going to do that, but she does. Not long after finding out that he's actually just quit, like literally the next day he quit his job and said he's moving somewhere, so he's running away from it, right? He wants away.
That's
from
while they're at the doctor's office. Liddy gets a text that's like, oh, he's left, he's taken another position, he's bailing, and she makes the point of saying like, I was just at his office, he still had everything on his desk. Like, this is not a long-term plan that he's just revealing to us. This
is a reaction to what's happened. And it's like, okay, so they have these two women come to see her, and they sit her down, and again, it's kind of like how the failures of the system here, where they're like, well, unfortunately, you know, he quit, like, you know, a few hours before you actually, or a day or whatever before you reported this. So he's not actually employed by us anymore, so there's really nothing we can do. And like, and that's obviously the main part, but there's kind of this general sentiment of like, again, it feels like they're saying stock phrases to the point where, like, one of the things that arguably I might like about this scene is the irony of, like, this is two women who are speaking to her, and at one point, one of them says, "We know what you're going through. We're women," and that's like, it is very deadpan. Right?
Yeah. She's like, I'm sorry, what? And she's like, we're women.
And it's like, okay, that doesn't really like help her. I get the point you're trying to make, but it doesn't really help her situation right now.
Yeah. No, I feel like both these sequences come as a pair, and either it works for you or it doesn't, where it is this idea of we, you know, not as a culture or anything like that, but we have these systems in place to help these people, to deal with these people, like when they need assistance and when these bad things happen. But the system is still just like a script, you know? It's not like there's an actual emotional safety net there. It's literally just like, okay, the doctor's going to tell you what you need to do. We'll run these tests, do whatever. The people at your job are going to say what they can do, but like, they're not going to help work you through it. They're not going to offer up services or whatever. They're going to just say, okay, well, here's what our options are. We're pretty limited.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning that no one that she encounters with this incident, whether it's the doctor, these ladies at the university, not one, because this is obviously something that happens to victims who speak out, right, and come forward, right? This movie does not do it. It doesn't have anyone not believe her, which is good. But I think that's actually more illuminating for all these problems, is that even in the perfect case where everyone believes her and she's going through the system, it still turns out this way. There still doesn't feel like any kind of like resolution or any like. And
well, I think that's specific though, is that even if, and we get to this later on in the thing, but even if she does get like full resolution of he goes to jail, he's punished for his crimes, all that sort of stuff, it still wouldn't fix what happened to her. It still wouldn't undo things. So I feel like the lack of a resolution is very telling through these sequences where it's like, yeah, it wouldn't have helped anyway in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I think that's two separate things though. I think the idea of like even getting absolute justice isn't going to erase the experience of what happened. That's going to be true no matter what. No matter how perfect the system is for dealing with it, that's still always going to be true. The trauma of what happened is not going to be cured because of that. But this is like showing just like how human a lot of this is, and just how like almost the opposite the effect it has on like the victim by trying to speak to these people. And the one option she has is like, well, it doesn't work for us anymore. You can go and tell the police and actually, get a warrant out for his arrest. You can go and make this like an official thing. And obviously, we don't really know in the moment why, but she chooses. Seemingly chooses not to do that, right? We don't see her go through that process, and when we cut to a new chapter, and not too much after this, we kind of eventually do get a bit of a reason from her why she didn't go down that path. At least what she says. Maybe there's more to it as well that we can maybe speculate on our feelings about. Yeah. So
was it in the new chapter where we get the Kitten and Gavin? I thought that was still part of this period.
The Kitten and initial Gavin stuff might be in this chapter. Okay. But I was talking about when she talks about the jury stuff, which is definitely the next chapter. Yeah,
the jury stuff's... Yeah. I think the jury stuff, that is in its entirety the next chapter. I think that's the only thing we get from that year.
Yeah. I think that's the year with the questions, I want to say that one's called. Yes. So, like that stuff... I think like I like the point of both of the scenes that we've just talked about. I just think that it's played for too much for kind of like awkward, deadpan, like satirical humor in a way that I don't think I was vibing with, especially with how intense I felt with everything that came right before them. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. Is like I can easily understand and see why the whiplash and the style of humor comparatively between those scenes would off-put a lot of people here, and see this as by far and away a not good resolution for that. For me, I'm half and half, whereas I think that I would have preferred something else. I do see the directorial intent here. I see the reason that it's put into this moment, and to have her respond, not as this broken person who is just like still recovering or anything like that, just almost to a level of shock where it's like, life goes on and she's just like trying to roll with it. Because immediately the next scene following the university thing is her just silently crying in her bed. Like she's just, clearly it's still affecting her. It's not like this is something where it's she's all of a sudden just cracking jokes all the time. It's her defense mechanism. It's the only way that she is knowing how to deal and cope with this in the moment.
Yeah, well, I think I get the point of that, but there's something about the writing or maybe the performance that just doesn't feel quite right to the way she's quipping, right? It feels like, it doesn't feel right to me in those couple of scenes. And you can tell me that, she's still upset and she's obviously still like breaking down at night when she's alone, and like, this is like a front she's putting on or whatever. But it feels like there should maybe be more, like we've seen her be quippy with just a friend before. I think there should be something visible to us, the audience, that she's having to fake it right now. Like it's there, but like we can see that she's like forcing it or something, like.
I mean, I think they made an attempt at that with the reveal that he's leaving, because we see her reaction to that is like, the friend is basically like, this is good news, right? Like you're never gonna have to see him again. And she's just like, I don't know. I have no idea how to process this. The fact that he's just up and leaving. And like, I'm not going to have to face him again. I'm never going to get that level of resolution.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a tough one to parse, to be honest, because I think that it feels weird critiquing some of these elements.
Do you know what it kind of reminded me of? Just obviously not in subject matter, but in that sort of awkward humor aspect. It reminded me of the middle part of Frances Ha, where she's in a very sad situation, yet she still is like staying quippy. She still is like trying to maintain that like outwardly upbeat persona.
Yeah, but she's not the whole movie though in that movie. That's consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But that's just specifically I'm thinking of like I think it was Paris sequence when she just goes and visits Paris for like a day. Like that whole thing felt profoundly depressing and sad, and yet the character is still forced to like keep up this sort of like, well, that's the quirky situation I forced myself into.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a dramedy, that movie, but it's very coming of age, and it's all about like, you know, she's done this to herself kind of thing, whereas this is obviously a very different story contextually. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I could keep trying to parse it. I mean, I think fundamentally the quippiness just wasn't working for me, right? I mean, I can try and justify it and explain it in 5-6 different ways, but ultimately it was just not working. So
I get it. Yeah.
I mean, I think we do set up some of the Gavin stuff because she wants to set fire to his I mean, we don't know that at first, but she basically runs to like the neighbor's house, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Gavin," and she's like, "I need liquid that's flammable." Lighter fluid? Is that the thing?
If I wanted to start a fire, do you have a thing to do that? Matches? No, like a liquid. Like, oh, lighter fluid? Yeah, that. How much of that do you have?
Yeah, what's it for? Hot dogs. And there's an awkward pause, and she's like, "Oh, we only bought 2 hot dogs, so I can't invite you over for the hot dogs we're making." Yeah.
And then he comes back, he's like, "Nah, that's okay. I got something with my mom I got to do anyway. Actually, that's a lie. I'm just shielding myself from rejection." And she's like, cool.
Yeah, and obviously it's presenting him as this kind of goofball, innocent guy, right? Who, you know, at least on the surface is probably like not a threat, right? That's at least kind of even though notably in this scene, she does, like, when he says, "Hey, do you want to, like, you know, wait inside while I go grab it?" She's like, "No, I'll stay out here." And he does instantly go, "Oh, yeah, that's fine. I'll go in and get it." But like, it's notable that she says no to that. It's like, no, I'm not going into a house with someone I barely know. Like, I'm not doing that again.
You immediately feel like the moment that was offered, there's kind of just a cold flush.
Yeah.
There's a moment of just like, oh God. And she panics for a second, and he's just like, okay, no problem.
Yeah, so there's that. And then obviously she doesn't go through with burning the office, which we actually already knew from the first segment that she has his old office. Because that was one of the teases, is that, I can't explain to the faculty why it's awkward for me to have his office, so I just kind of have to put up with it.
Well, okay, so that was a little bit weird to me in terms of, like, yes, she can't explain it to the faculty, but clearly because she was approached by the faculty saying, "Hey, we know this happened," surely there has to be like someone who knows about it that she could theoretically, if she wanted to, make us think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume that she went to like administration, not like the other teaching staff that are in that department.
Her department head or anything like that.
So maybe they wouldn't know, and maybe she doesn't want everyone to know what happened to her, because then it'll just be like...
Well, that's what the jury scene, I feel like, is primarily about.
Of course, yeah, which we're really getting to here, because that's like, you know, she's got jury duty, right? So,
well, the only other thing that happens, just tiny little interstitial, is she finds a stray kitten, and she picks up some food for it, brings it home, tells the roommate, like, "Hey, I got a cat," and the roommate's just like, "If that's what you need right now, go for it."
Yeah, whatever you need, I think was the exact line. It was like, all right, if that's what she's coping with, then we've got a cat now.
And then the final thing that we leave the sequence off with is she actually gets her thesis out and tapes it up to her window to act as like almost blinds in a way. Like we see her trying to cover up the window with a blanket earlier, and that doesn't work. And so she puts up her thesis instead. I
will admit, when she was trying to cover, I get the idea she doesn't want people looking in at her, and she's like trying to hold up this blanket and it just keeps falling down. I was like, curtains would do you here.
Curtains on her PhD student budget.
I've never been in someone's house where they've not had curtains up at every window.
That's fair. I mean, in American households, every window has blinds, like the drawstring one. So
Yeah.
most windows probably don't have curtains for most like apartments or anything.
Yeah. Honestly, here it's common to have both blinds and a curtain, but not the drop one. It'll usually be the Venetian style ones.
Oh, okay. Fancy.
Yeah, I don't know. Just was common here, but yeah. No, I didn't want. I mean, I wasn't trying to rush past the getting the kitten because obviously that's a very sweet moment, and it's like, oh, something she can like look after and protect and have some sense of control.
Something that
over.
will definitely not harm her. Something that is like purely innocent.
I've got cat scratches to prove otherwise, might I add.
Yeah. Same. I'm pretty sure this shoulder's nothing but just scar tissue right now.
But now she's got jury duty sometime, and it's kind of undetermined exactly where this falls between some of the other segments. We just know it's later.
Yeah. So there's the period. I think, if I'm correct here, this whole movie is a 4-year span. So we open up with year 3. That's that sequence. Then we go to year. Oh no, sorry, it's a 5-year span technically. We open up with year 4. We then go back to year 1, 2, 3 in that order, and then we go to year 5 at the end.
To be fair, I thought it was only 4 because I was taking the first and last segment as the same year. Not that they have to be, because obviously it's the start and end of a pregnancy. But the way they're both titled the exact same thing, Year of the Baby, made me think that was all 1 year. But regardless, you're right about the span.
Yeah, but that is to say that each of these, because one character does specifically say like, it's been 3 years since it happened or anything like that. That is the point where I think each of these title cards is saying that they happen in different years. So this jury duty thing would be a full year after the assault happened.
Yeah. The one that was throwing me in terms of order is I wasn't sure if it probably wouldn't be if each one's meant to be like a separate year, but I was wondering almost if this John Carroll Lynch scene with the sandwich, like that segment, if that was like after the initial segment, like in between the 2 visits from Liddy, just because it felt like the growth could have happened in there, because that seemed like a positive step. But regardless.
No, I've got a counter for that, which is immediately after the John Carroll Lynch stuff, or wherever. The John Carroll Lynch stuff is after she has the job.
Yes.
And she calls Liddy on the phone and says, "Hey, I've got the job." Like,
that's true. Okay, you're right. Okay, yeah. So there's some definitive timeline stuff there. I think the problem is that a lot of the stuff that isn't the main part of each segment, I forget which segment it was in. And, so like, I remember, okay, where she meets the guy and has a sandwich, that's the sandwich segment, but I don't remember what the other parts were in that section. But anyway, the jury stuff is like, okay, they're doing the, like, she's filling out the form, and she's into kind of the final round of selections, basically, where like the prosecutor's talking to each of them and saying, hey, and she's describing the difference between circumstantial evidence and direct, testimony, that kind of thing. And she's like, hey, have any of you ever been like the victim of a crime? And like her and like one other guy hold up their hand, and the guy's like, oh yeah, I was robbed at gunpoint. And she's like, oh, do you think this would make you biased or whatever, and making a choice like in this jury? And he's like, nah, I don't think so. And then she looks at Agnes and says, hey, so what was your thing? And she's like, oh, I didn't realize I'd have to, I took my hand down quickly because I realized I didn't want to share what happened. So she never actually says what happened, although I think her and probably the rest of the jury probably put it together, the type of crime that it maybe was.
I was going to say, look, if I were that lawyer, I would immediately say this entire jury pool is tainted. We need to get in everybody else, because she makes a very compelling argument, like on her side of like, why jail is maybe like, why didn't, okay, backing it up. Over the course of this conversation...
before she gets to that, one of the first things she says, actually, is that she's not really sure if the law makes any sense, or something to that effect. Like, she opens with that, and then by the end of it, you get what she meant by that.
Yeah. So during this sequence, like, the prosecutor's basically just prying a little bit. And I don't think it's entirely appropriate, but she's basically like, do you think this would make you impartial? Do you think you could stay impartial during all this? And she gives like a thoughtful answer. She's like, I've been thinking about that for a while. I really don't know if I would be able to. I think I would be better suited for some other civil service rather than jury duty. And they bring up her teaching and how she's hoping to get a professorship. Like right now, she's just part-time. And then the judge starts reading from the questionnaire. And she's like, I really, really do not want you sharing that information. I thought that would all be private. Like we would keep that between us. And it's only at this point that she's being grilled on like what the crime was. Not like in a mean way, but just the prosecutor's like, hey, like, do you think, like, why didn't you bring this person? Like, did you ever talk to the police? Why didn't you ever file charges or whatever? And she makes the point of saying he has a kid. And I want him to not be the type of person who does that sort of thing. But I also think that if he went to jail, he'd just be the person who did that in jail. And that's where I feel like they boil down her decision making so much in this point where, again, going back to the earlier stuff of it's all part of the script, but it wouldn't actually like count for anything. It wouldn't change anything. Same here where she views jails like, who benefits from that? The kid's without his father. He's in jail for a while. He's not actually like learning anything. He's not changing at all. And then I'm still stuck with what happened to me. And all that's said in like that one line.
Yeah, it's retroactively explaining why she did choose to not go to the police. And obviously there's other reasons why she may have decided against it as well. I think you could speculate all the more obvious reasons why someone doesn't want to go forward and like go through the process. But
yeah, she's very clearly private. Like she doesn't like sharing what happened to her either.
Yeah, for sure. And she makes that kind of clear here. She doesn't want to share it, even though it's very... Because, at one point when she's saying, oh, he's got a kid, it's like, okay, clearly we're talking about something specific here. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a very well done scene. This is actually, when I said there's a few great scenes in this movie, this is the second one. This is like, after the whole house and the journey home part, I think this is the other scene where it felt really special and unique, the way it was like having her like reveal some of these feelings to a jury. And they're very complex feelings because it's not... Like, in some ways, it's a very thoughtful answer where she's talking about how the jail system's not going to accomplish anything. But it's not because, like, it's not this, like, good thing either, because, like you even said, even in the perfect case scenario where he learns and grows, it's not going to necessarily change her experience or anything, and there's only kind of a hope for that, but it's not a guarantee. But at the same time, obviously, they ultimately decide to, like, excuse her. We don't want her because she clearly doesn't think jail's a good idea, and we don't want that in a jury.
And I think that this also, we were talking about setup and payoff, I think this also sets up very cleverly here that I think that she views him, especially the way she described him earlier, of having that look of fear on his face and all that stuff. She views him as not like someone who is likely to reoffend. She doesn't view him as someone who has done this sort of thing before, will do it again, and therefore doesn't need to be like separated out, doesn't need to be removed from society, like not punishing him for a one-time mistake in a way that would ruin multiple lives. Whereas then when we get the later on confession in the next year, it recontextualizes everything.
It gets murkier, with the later sequence where basically, I mean, to use like a really silly term to describe this, but it's copium. I feel like she's got copium here that, okay, what he did was awful and it's messed me up, but I'm kind of hoping that he's a bit better than that, or he's remorseful. He ran away, which is maybe a little cowardly in some ways, but perhaps that's a sign that he, doesn't want to be that or whatever, right? Yeah. And maybe it's like a sense again of trying to cope. But of course, what you're referring to, though, the later scene that contextualizes it a bit differently, is that once she does get the job, right? And there's something in the interstitial that I want to talk about as well. I might go back to like her getting the job, but to skip ahead when she has the job and we see her teaching Lolita in class, and she's doing a good job. That the students are interacting with her and they're talking about, and it's almost like a meta moment actually, where they're talking about the events in Lolita and how like one of the but it feels weird saying boys because they're still like 22 here, but like one of the guys is like, oh, I was kind of disgusted by what's happening in the story, and she's like, well, yeah, but were you conflicted because the craft of how it's been told and like what's it's saying so good? And
Yeah.
And so there's that's a bit meta almost, like of watching a movie like this where you're kind of like horrified by the situation we're dealing with, but the craft of it and trying to get certain ideas across, or it might be worth the point. Anyway, so things I don't like here, funnily enough, blend into things that are good, but Natasha, our favorite, like, serious bitch face monster from earlier, who's always glaring. In fact, true to form, it's cementing her cartoon status of just like movie character like thing. Is that in the middle of the class, one of the guys is like, "Hey, that
crazy lady's back again.
Yeah, that woman's back," and then she looks behind her in the door, and like she's just at the window, like with a Klaus Kinski eyes, just being like, "I'm going to kill you later." Like, that's the look she has on her face, and I'm like, oh god, why are we still dealing with this character? She's, every time she shows up, she's dragging things down. Having said that, though, her conversation with Agnes in Agnes's office is obviously illuminating and brings some things up for Agnes, because Natasha comes in and she has that awkward thing where she's like, I wanted this job. And Agnes is like, yep, I'm sorry about that, but...
See, I think Natasha says, like, do you feel bad? And she's like, I feel bad about a lot of things, but this is not one of those things.
No, but because the thing from Natasha is that Natasha kind of has this, like I say, jealousy in her for Agnes, and says that, oh, everything comes easy to you or something like that. And she's like, everything does not come easy to me. And so you've got this perception where Natasha doesn't know what's happened to Agnes and is like, oh, he liked you so much and he put in good words for you, blah, blah. And the interesting note here is that she's like, I slept with him and he didn't even like give me like a sit down like conversation about my thesis or whatever. And then obviously Agnes, like, the eyes like, widen and look right at her. It's like, wait, what? You slept with him? She's like, yeah. On purpose? Did you want that? Like, she's like talking around it a little bit, but she's trying to like ascertain, was this something you did consensually? And ultimately, Natasha says it was on purpose, and says, oh, it was 5 minutes long. I've had better, but it was okay, or something like that. Like, she says it in this very casual way. It clearly wasn't like a traumatic thing. It was just something she did. And whatever.
And it immediately plunges her back into like hyperventilating, straight back in the moment sort of thing.
Because this obviously kind of is like, wait, okay, so he had sex with other students before her, seemingly got his way, where, Natasha was up for it, maybe threw herself at him, whatever you want to do. But the idea that he was pursuing this before, and then he tried to pursue it with her, and it obviously went badly very quickly, kind of like recontextualizes this idea as that, oh, it was a one-time thing and maybe he wants to be better, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the way that I pictured it, and I'm assuming the way that Agnes also was kind of picturing it, is this idea that he pulled all the same moves. He did the same things that happened with her. It just so happened that Natasha was up for it, that she was, okay with the situation, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't, even potentially, if she wasn't okay with it, that it wouldn't have gone down the same path, that it wouldn't have hit the same level that it hit her.
And to be clear here, just on like a real world perspective, like, there's still a power dynamics problem, even like, in the moment the woman is up for it, right? There's still like this idea of him. He's in the position of authority. He's the older man, talking her into his place. Even if she's game for it when he makes a move, there's still like an element there of like, you know what I'm saying.
I'm sure there's something in the teacher's handbook that specifically says, do not do this thing.
yeah. There's a whole can of worms to get into at a certain point. But
what I know you want to go back to an earlier scene, but just in this scene here, when she basically says, you've always had it so easy, like everybody likes you, you're so easy to be friends with or whatever like that. I think it's good characterization of Natasha in that point as well, because she recognizes she's a bitch. Like, she recognizes that people don't like hanging around with her. But I think that Agnes does a great job of punching back and saying, like, you don't like me. Like, clearly not everybody likes me because you don't like me. And she says, like, okay, fair point. But, Decker did. And that's where Agnes kind of, it feels like time has passed. It feels like she's come to her own self-realizations, because she says, you know what? I don't think he actually did like me, because you don't say the things you say like that. You don't praise people like that, and yet treat them so much like an object and not like an actual person. And obviously it falls on deaf ears with Natasha, but for us, the audience, we get that there has been a little bit of trying to contextualize things, trying to come to an understanding of like what kind of man Decker actually was.
Yeah, but this is like right before we get to the sandwich stuff. So this is obviously is triggering for, and that's why she starts hyperventilating in the car. But before we get to that, I want to go back a little bit to when she gets the job, because there's this scene where she sits down with, I don't know if it's the dean or the college or whoever, maybe it's just the head of this department.
Department head, yeah.
But he sits down and he's like, hey, you've been working here part time, you've been teaching, doing various things and like certain modules and whatnot. And we've been looking for a replacement. Decker's been gone for a little while now, but we wanted to get the right fit. And says, the entire staff, the department's all unanimously, agreed and thinks you're the right fit. And here's, I'm looking at some of the paperwork here, they said you were, hardworking, you were this, you were that. And the last word they says is, it was not exceptional. What was the word he said earlier on? Extraordinary, right? Extraordinary. And the look in her face is like, she's sort of like still pretending to be happy to hear that, but it's like, that's his word. He's the one who said that. And notably, after this scene, she goes home and rips her thesis off the windows, and we end up on that one page where he's put in the red pen extraordinary, and it's like that. Like, she's in his office. She kind of has this job because of, in part, not entirely, but in part because of stuff that he said in the past. Like, this specter of him in her life is still lingering in all these ways. It's a really well done moment.
There's a few other tiny little hints thrown in. One is that he says, everyone in the department, both past and present.
Yeah,
and she's like, past? Who we don't get clarification who the past was, but like that is something that comes up. And then the other part of it is that he says, okay, so you'll be teaching this introductory course, like that's what comes with the position, whatever, but you also get to create your own elective. That's part of being the professor, and we urge you to do this short story elective because we love your thesis so much. And she, of course, says that she hasn't even looked at her thesis in years. Like, she doesn't, like, she's kind of distancing herself a little bit from it, saying like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do that. But she ultimately is like, if that's part of the position, yeah, of course I'll do it, I'll take it out. And that's where we go back and we see she takes the thesis off of her window, and it does feel like it's been there in front of her this whole time, but she hasn't actually ever like looked at it. It's just been this reminder of what happened to her, and now that she's forced to finally like take it down and is forced to make a course essentially almost around this thesis, she's forced to like finally deal with it again.
Yeah, to confront it a little bit. So no, it's a really good scene. Like, I really like that scene where she's getting the job, because all those little payoffs to like things he said earlier really work.
Yep. There's only one bit that happens like right after the title card, just before this, and we see that she has begun having sex with Gavin, and the way it's shot, it's very much of like perfunctory. Like, she is not into it. She is there to like, she wants a relationship with Gavin. It seems like she's happy to be with him, but she is not getting any sort of pleasure out of this on her end.
Not yet, anyway. More than that a little bit later. Yeah, the whole sandwich bit though. So she starts hyperventilating in the car, and she pulls over to not crash as one does. Yep. And John Carroll Lynch is here, and he's one scene. Pretty much, where he comes up and at first he's just like, hey, we're not open, like, he owns like a little sandwich shop, but he sees obviously once he gets close that she's like, having a panic attack basically, and he's like, oh, you okay? Hey, my son gets like these kind of attacks, like, hey, and he actually talks her through. He's like, hey, breathe with me, and he counts up and down, and it's like, okay, he's been helpful, he's been nice, and it's this kind of and you're like, oh god, like, I hope this doesn't take a turn where this is going to cause more trauma. Not that I expect him to attack her or anything, but just this idea that it wouldn't go the way it does, where he actually ends up in a very sort of like just good listener, where he listens to what she's saying, and he asks, he asks a couple of questions, but it's mostly about just taking what she's saying in and letting her get things off of her chest. And he gives her a sandwich, of course, which is where
he's very much a compassionate character, where he doesn't press for details. He doesn't like do anything untoward.
Joe, I think it is two things. One, I'm so used to him playing creepy characters from other things. Yeah. And two, like, it's not that every character she's come into has been a danger to her, but more that something they bring up in one way or another triggers one of her memories or that trauma, right? It's not like Natasha was trying to traumatize her, or the guy giving her the job was trying to traumatize her. It's just sort of naturally. So I was thinking that something would, but it ended up being this kind of more sweet scene where he just listens to, it's like, hey, something happened to me a few years ago and I'm still kind of dealing with it. And, going with this idea that maybe she'll kill herself at some point, when he says, do you want to have, a family and kids? She's like, oh, I don't really see myself getting old and having kids. That has a kind of like a dark undertone when you know that maybe she is possibly suicidal.
Yeah, this idea of just not planning for the future, and like it can kind of take on the method of either A, she is going to kill herself, but B, also that she just kind of still hasn't progressed out of this moment in her life. She's still just kind of been stuck here and hasn't fully processed it and gotten past to see whatever the next thing is going to be. Yeah,
so it's a really, really good sequence.
I especially appreciate the fact that like most of his conversation is about the sandwiches. Like he's helping her and like relaxing her by just being like, yeah, I wanted to set some tables out here, but I share a parking lot with the dump nearby or the construction workers or whatever, and like I have to ask them permission and screw them. And then you hear a little like yell back from nearby, like just tiny little touches like that make it, as much as the earlier scene felt like very not cringe, but again, awkward comedy. This one feels very comedy just by nature of like, it's just two characters enjoying talking with each other and just having little quips, like not even like the awkward quips, but just like natural, here's just how two strangers would talk if they have to make small talk.
Yeah. Nothing here, because that just kind of felt like a little character bit to me. It didn't feel like it was trying to be quirky with that little moment.
Like he specifically like stops and is just like, hey, we can talk, we can do whatever. You don't have to tell me anything. But the one direct question that he asks is like, do you feel safe in your home?
Yeah, that's at the end of the scene. It's after she's talked about like still getting over what happened to her. And again, she's never actually said what it is directly, but you can tell that he's probably, again, made some assumptions and so the one thing he does ask at the very end of the scene is, do you feel safe at home? And obviously he doesn't know if she lives with someone. In fact, she responds with, I have a cat, meaning I'm fine.
Yeah. And I think the other major like line here that he says is when she's like, I'm not in any immediate danger. It was a little over 3 years ago. He specifically says like, that's not a long time. Like it's a lot of time, but it's not a long time. And you get that feeling of like, so much can change in that period, but it's also not enough time to fully move past something like that. And she gets it. She understands what he's trying to say.
And that's the thing with Lydia as well, is that she's moved to New York. She's now in a relationship. She's got a kid on the way. Maybe not at this point in the timeline, but like soon. So the idea that life is moving on for her in a way that for Agnes it's a little bit stagnant. It's agnant. Sorry, that's a bad joke.
Talk about the awkward cringe humor.
So yeah, and then this leads to kind of like the cat while she's asleep brings her a mouse as a gift. It's not quite dead, injured, but not quite dead. So we just hear her freaking out.
How quickly did you get it? Because we don't see it immediately. We just get like a shot of the hallway and some yelling and shouting. How quickly did you get that it was a not quite dead mouse?
Not right away, but I think I got it quicker than some people do or would, because I'm familiar with the idea of cats bringing home either mice or birds as what they think are gifts to their owners. My cats are all house cats just now, but in the past I've had a cat that's went outdoors and I have experienced such a thing. So
I've gotten a dead bird in my house as well. I'm aware of the process.
Yeah. I think as soon as it shifted to like, what did you do? Once it was clear it wasn't just like some vomit or poop, right? I was like, oh, it's a dead animal.
Okay. So the thing that threw me off just temporarily was that the cat, maybe it was just the sound effect library, maybe it was whatever. It was making some really weird meows. And my initial thought was somehow without her knowledge or anything like that, is that the cat got pregnant and was like giving birth. It wasn't until she said the line of like something like, oh, you didn't even kill it all the way, or like, oh, you could at least have killed it. That's where I'm like, oh, okay, that's something else. But I thought like she woke up and the cat was just like giving birth to a litter right then.
Nah, I never thought that. But you know, obviously the symbolism here is that when she's looking for something to put the mouse in, she ends up having the only bag she's got handy is the one in the closet that her boots are in from that night that have been there for years at this point. And she brings that bag through. She puts the mouse in there, and she has to put it out of its misery because it's not quite dead. So she starts whacking it with a book, and that's so it's just the whole thing that plays out. It's also mentioned.
I'm not sure, but I could be wrong here. I think the book is Decker's book from like the beginning of the movie, where she says
I'd have to check that. Before we move on, though, we should mention that there is a recurring theme of this shot of the front door.
Yes.
It's set up early where you get this sense of when Gavin's first introduces, it's Lydia who goes up and answers the door, but after the things happened, we see her like go up and lock the door a couple times, and this idea of like her being scared that someone might come through the front door. So this idea of constant fear afterwards is definitely sort of like there in a visual sense throughout.
If you put it in order, though, of like pretty much every year has one of those moments, jury year notwithstanding. If you put them in the order, though, you do see this lessening. You see this like the first time she feels like she hears somebody on the other side, she whips it open really fast to like see who it is and catch them and then locks it afterwards. Whereas in later years, it's a lot more of just kind of feeling like habit, feeling more of like something that she just kind of does because she's been doing it than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea, the boots are in the bag because she can't look at them. And then, a couple of years later, she's just thrown them on the floor because she used the bag to go and deal with a dead mouse, like in the heat of the moment. That's good stuff. But this, and I think like this is maybe like where we're going to like try and analyze here, like why this makes her feel like she wants to go and have sex. And I think for me, I guess in some level, like putting the mouse out of its misery was like a sense of closure, because this was like a trauma she could do something about for the mouse, not for herself, but like the mouse is going through this horrible thing. She can solve this, and there's maybe a sense of power that comes with this. Like she's, I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I think the mouse itself, it's not so much of a thing that she can solve, but the mouse itself is representative of like a creature in suffering, a creature who is like, cannot continue down this path. It needs to be taken care of. And she does it a mercy, obviously. She goes like the wrong way or whatever. Not wrong way, but she does what she can. But I think that it's supposed to basically represent like the death of her suffering, like the idea of like she's taken the issues she has here. And it's also important to note that right before she does it, she does like apologize to the mouse. She's like, I'm sorry. Like there's no other way. We got to do this. I feel like that's a little bit of self-imprinting where she's kind of putting her own troubles and problems, whatever, kind of imbuing it into the mouse and then just saying like, and it's done. It's gone. What
I would say though, to go along with you saying that it represents the death of her suffering, that's not true though. Like I think she thinks that, and it's like a false like sort of flag, if you will. But that's all I'd point out though, because I think it's not done. It's not, because I think the whole thing with this scene where she runs to Gavin and says, "Come have sex with me right now," and then he kind of awkwardly goes, "Oh, I do need my shoes." No, I do need my shoes. And then
I will say you're toning it down for YouTube. I get why you can't say what she actually says, but like that line caught me so off guard. Because, like, she just killed this mouse. She's running through the woods screaming Gavin's name. She's like, Gavin! And I'm like, oh, man, this really upset her. This really caused a problem. And then she just drops that line in such a blunt fashion. I'm like, oh, all right, sure.
Yeah, and then, cut to them, like, on her couch, and, like, it looks
all right,
more...
so let's talk about that. Let's because the look on Gavin's face does not imply that this is like the normal, like I don't know, he's striking me like he's like not used to this, or something like unexpected is happening here.
Well, I think it's just her intensity. I think she's never acted like this. The previous sex scene we had of them, she's just lying there like kind of half dead while he's on top doing the work. Here she's on top, she's in the position of like actually performing the action, and he's like reacting to that, and it cuts to the shot from outside the window, and it seems like it's a lot more intense. They're he's out of breath, she's out of breath. It feels a lot more passionate than anything prior. Okay. I think this is just such a difference, because and not to get too graphic here, but I think the implication with her arm movement is that at the start of the scene, penetration has not happened yet. It starts off with her arm kind of like, jerking him off, right? I don't know the way to be blunt about it, right? Yeah. And then obviously it transitions at some point into just full on sex. I think this idea of her doing that and like taking control of his equipment, I think is new. I think that's something he is like, whoa, I didn't know she had this in her kind of moment.
Okay. No, that's fair. The arm movement was really what was throwing me off. I was like, is this like something where she like, again, she's maybe doing something to herself and then also for him simultaneously? Is this something where there is penetration? I wasn't entirely sure what to read of that scene, but Gavin's face was telling me that like this wasn't just normal sex between them that they have been having.
Between them, sure. I think there's nothing here that's irregular in general. I think it's just new for what their experiences have been up until this point. But
fair enough.
What's interesting here, though, is the following sequence where she's in the bathtub and he comes in saying, hey, can I pee? And she's like, yeah, go right ahead. And the toilet's like behind where her head is. So he's just kind of, but he's angling it kind of like he doesn't want her to see either if she does turn around. And then when he says, hey, can I get in the bath? She's like, yeah, okay. But she hesitates a little bit. She's like, yeah, sure, I guess, why not? And but as he's like taking his clothes off and he's getting in, like he's kind of hiding his genitals. And she's like, why are you hiding? You don't have to hide it. And he's like, well, it's quite small right now, so I feel a bit. Yeah. I'm
not fully ready for you to see it.
Right. And she's like, guys are weird. And he sits down, but I don't want to make jokes about this scene though, because I think there's a lot of like I think that moment in and of itself is obviously a setup for what happens in a minute. But they're awkwardly sitting at either end of the bathtub. And they're talking about how she's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's so small. And he makes a suggestion. He's like, hey, why don't I sit behind you? Like I'm hugging you and we'll fit better, right? Mm-hmm. And he stands up and he's like going, he's getting in position. And she's like, hey, stop for a second. And he's standing there and she's like, can I see it? Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay. And obviously,
he's hesitant, but he does it.
But he's taking his hands away, and there's just a shot of her face staring at his penis. And eventually, she's sort of like tilting her head a little bit and eventually says, oh, I never see it looking this soft. It's better this way. Mm. And then he gets him, in the bathtub behind her. And I think that little moment is interesting from the idea that the penis is always presented to a woman as like an object of sex. It's always like when it's either ready or on its way to being ready to go for the activity.
Yeah. When it's intimidating,
right?
Instead of separate.
And the idea being that men don't want you to see it when it's at its most vulnerable, when it's at its most delicate and whatever. So obviously she finds, I don't know if it's necessarily like a power dynamic shift, but she feels like, oh, this isn't actually that scary. I'm looking at this thing and it's whatever. So I think that's one part of this scene. But then perhaps the more complex part of the scene is that when he is sitting in the bathtub with her and they're talking, she's like, hey, do you want the stuff normal people have, and it's like, oh, you mean family and stuff like that? And he's like, yeah, I do want that stuff. And then she kind of repeats to some extent what she said before to the other character, which is, oh, I don't really see myself as being old and having kids and whatnot. And what's notable here to me is the way that she reacts when he starts saying, oh, people think they don't want to have kids, but then, then they change their minds, and he's kind of try, and it's not even like he's doing anything malicious or even trying to ignore what she's saying, but I think in the moment she feels like he's trying to pivot her into a lane, right? This idea that oh, but you're going to want to do that eventually, and this is what I want. So this is what we're because let me finish. Because she gets cold, she leans forward, and then even says the line, "It's cold," and he says, "No, I think it's just fine." As he kind of rubs her back, and then she just kind of that's basically the end of the scene where she turns on the hot water, and the body language says, oh, she was almost like lulling herself into like a place of comfort with him after the sex, but then this little interaction is kind of said, no, I don't necessarily want normal things, and I still feel like he, you know, as nice and as innocent as this guy is, as much as Gavin is this goofball kind of friendly guy, and doesn't seem to have like a bad bone in his body from what we see of him. This is still a moment where, oh, like there's still a disconnect here with how we're communicating, and you know what he wants is, and even the idea that in their first sex scene he just asks afterwards, oh, did you enjoy the sex, and she says yeah, and it's just this lie, because we saw her face, like she was just lying there taking it effectively as kind of like a routine, if nothing else.
So I to some extent agree with what you're saying there. I think the idea that I was picking up from this, especially to go back all the way from like the killing the mouse up until now, is this idea that like she within this moment found some level of her own personal liberation. She found some level to get past some barrier that was holding her back, and she, you know, felt proud of that. She was happy to have it. And then, I mean, all the soft penis talk before this was essentially just shorthand of like the vulnerability, the opening up, and how Gavin is, you know, a little bit embarrassed to be vulnerable the same way that anybody is. She finds some comfort in that. She finds some comfort in how he is a little bit embarrassed to open up like that, knowing that she's also the same way. But then immediately following that, he's asking these personal questions. And more specifically, all the questions are kind of leaning on the idea of our relation, like, look at our relationship. I'm asking you what you want for a future. Like, how much of a deeper commitment sort of thing are we looking at here moving forward? How much of something where, how far is our relationship going to go? And, you know, by the way that he talks about kids, it's obvious that to some extent he does want them. He does want to have a family eventually down the road. And for her, despite just having this moment of personal liberation or whatnot, there is this, like we've said, this idea where she doesn't think about the future. She doesn't want to think about that. And there still is something that is not completely, I don't want to say fixed in her, but there's still that part of her that has been changed permanently since the assault happened. So I think that her having that moment where she says it's cold or whatever like that is kind of her coming to that realization of no matter how much she feels like she's over it, no matter how much progress she moves forward here, there is still always going to be that thing that's holding her back. And she's kind of upset by that in that moment where she's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to that point, no matter what leaps forward I'm ever going to be able to make.
I mean, I think the reason why I was reading the way I did is specifically the exchange where she says it's cold and he says, no, I think it's just fine. And kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say he's mansplaining to her. Like that's obviously a harsh term to throw into what he's saying there. But this idea of him trying to convince her, no, it's fine, which is like basically he's not just listening, right? He didn't listen to what she just said. He's not taking the hint. And again, he's not necessarily doing anything malicious or bad or wrong in the scene.
He doesn't know what happened or anything.
Yeah, but I think in this moment, it's this her realization of like, oh, I can't like feel safe and comfortable, and in the same way that Liddy just always listened and always just like whatever you need, like is there right now. So there's kind of like a more like understanding friendship there from Liddy that he's maybe not quite cracking. And I suppose we can't discount as well the fact that we end the movie with a baby, right? Because obviously final chapter is Liddy and her partner Fran. And does Fran like Agnes? I was having a tough time telling that, to be honest, from the way
I honestly, like, maybe this is just me and my face blindness. I thought that they shared a very similar build. Like, they're both like a little bit taller, a little bit gangly, similar hairstyles and whatnot. I was wondering if maybe that was playing into it a little bit of like, we never get anything where Liddy is actively like hitting on Agnes or anything like that, but it does feel like there is a little bit of that carried over of at least the people that she finds herself in the company of.
There's a little bit of weirdness there, and especially when Agnes offers to watch the baby for like an hour whilst they go and see the lighthouse that's nearby. Like clearly Fran's not that hot about the idea, and then actually says to her something that you should never say to someone who you're letting babysit for an hour, because it kind of shows you don't trust them, having to say out loud, don't drop my baby. Yeah, I think she knows that. I think she knows she's not supposed to drop the kid.
Probably. I mean, everyone's got different levels with that. No, I'm curious because for me, just this very brief scene here was kind of telling me a lot of Fran and Liddy's relationship, where it felt like Fran was very focused on the baby, like was kind of just like all in on having the baby or anything like that. Whereas Liddy, from the earlier phone call conversation, we know she's like completely infatuated with Fran, absolutely wants to do that. But the fact that like this romantic lighthouse, this thing that like Liddy is so excited to see, and Fran is basically just saying like, whatever, I'll get to it eventually. It just struck me as like there's a whole nother story being told here about their relationship that is obviously not the focal point of the story, but feels like it's very stressed to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe if anything, I'm just sort of thinking it's another example of like, okay, Lydia's got this whole life, and not every part of that new life is going to completely click with Agnes where she is. But she's left alone with the baby, which is, where we get this final sequence of her holding the baby up and saying, like, I hope nothing bad happens to you, and so on. I think, obviously this is not her changing her mind and thinking I do want kids, but it does maybe paint part of the idea of like, maybe on some level she didn't like the idea of having kids after what happened because, something bad could happen to them someday, and, this is, so there's kind of like she gets to talk to someone here who isn't going to question her answers. She gets to like almost have therapy with the baby because the baby will just listen to what she's going to say.
Well, I mean, that's also something that we could look at there is that when she got this cat, it was just this purely innocent creature. It was something that could never cause any harm or anything like that. But then we get this sequence of the cat murdering a smaller animal, which may, in her mind, kind of like push that away a little bit, like make it something where she's a bit more, I wouldn't say distant from the cat, but you know what I mean. Like it recontextualizes things in her mind a little bit.
I mean, that's just the food chain, though.
It is, but the food chain doesn't care about trauma, or trauma doesn't care about the food chain. And then, we get introduced to this baby, which is as close to purely innocent as you can possibly imagine, something that's not going to have any preconceived notions on any way. And that's also what she's offering up, this idea that if the baby gets into any problems or anything like that, she will be this judgment-free, safe place that the child can come to and will always be able to find comfort in.
Yeah, and how hard it is to find people who can listen. Because obviously, most good people will sympathize with what's happened to her, but maybe the only people that you truly feel will listen and understand with what you're saying are people who have went through something similar at some point in their lives. This idea that you only, people who came back from World War One, like they could only no one who didn't go to war understands what it was like to be in the war. They have to talk to other people who were in the war to share that experience.
And I mean, I would even say going to the extent where even the people who are in it, like you, especially for something like SA, the idea of like someone who went through similar something to her would possibly feel offended or like chastise her for not going to the police. Or completely separate from, like, every one of these is individualized to the point where no one can share your specific thought process and experience.
Yeah, and everyone gets trauma in different ways. Everyone copes with it in different ways. Like, there's no one size fits all here. This is obviously a specific story specific to this character and how she tries to deal with it. And how, or maybe doesn't try to deal with it, and how that lingers because there's, and I think that these ideas, these themes, and like these better scenes where the house and the going home, the jury scene, the scene where she gets the job, like I think those scenes are all absolute bangers, and they're also good at getting kind of the feelings across in the moments of the. You said like the moments where she gets like a chill up her spine. You can feel that every time it happens, and that's the stuff here that's excellent. That is like. Masterful filmmaking, honestly, and writing. And I want to give it credit for that. And I want to give it credit for telling this story from this perspective and sort of feeling like we're getting inside her head a little bit and trying to understand, even when people aren't trying to make her feel bad or to trigger trauma points, it's still happening and it's almost impossible to avoid. And it's something she has to deal with still. So I respect all those things. I want to give it its props, even though there's elements of it which I didn't like as much that were taking me out of it at points. So
yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can easily see where someone would be brought out by those different sort of quippy, more indie film like territory. I do think that from what I am aware with the actress, director, writer, she is from more of a comedic slant. She is a bit more, it's always something where it has something to say, but it does come from a more comedic background. So maybe that's just where she feels more comfortable. Maybe that's why it was more included here. But for me, it didn't take away enough for me to think that it was actively harming the movie. It just felt like a very intentional choice from the director to say that these are the sort of things that are still going to happen. It doesn't make them narratively fulfilling. It doesn't make it that it feels like it's adding to the movie as an experience, but it feels more true to life for me because of their presence where they are.
I think that's my point, though, is that it feels less true to life to me because it's so quippy and like movie character.
You need quippier friends then, Pete. Everyone else is this quippy all the time.
Oh, sure. That's the problem. I mean, ultimately, all I can say is that it was distracting me and it was taking me out of the feeling that I think the movie like wanted me to have, or I felt like I wanted to have anyway at any given point. So
right, I agree with that last part, the feeling that I wanted to have, and that's kind of the idea I was thinking of with where I thought the movie was going to go, and it always took a different direction. Like it never strayed true to what like this plot of movie has been done before, and
that's fine. Like I am not critiquing that. That's actually good. It's like that is a completely separate thing from the humor that I don't think quite works all the time. All right, David, what are you rating Sorry Baby out of 10? And are you going to be saying Sorry Baby after you give it a number?
Doubt it. I mean, I from what I'm gathering, I like this movie more than you.
I think you do a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why this one resonated so well with me. I really can't put a finger on it. Like, it is something that, I mean, without getting too personal, I don't really have any experience with. I don't have any like thing where this is hitting in any sort of like major way, but it is something that just feels like so personal in the way it's being told, and so from a perspective that I don't often see from this like more realistic setting to it. I don't know, something about it really hit for me. So I think overall I'm going to come down to this one as an 8.5. I think that this one, if I had to rank comparatively with like sentimental value, which I also gave an 8.5, I'd say it's a little bit lower than that, but still like fantastic. Like it's a great movie. I can see why it's getting praise and why it's getting lauded in a bunch of different spaces. So yeah, 8.5.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I like the stuff that's resonating here resonates with me a great deal. I think the way it handles its subject is fantastic. I think the exploration of character and how it's this constant thing she's still dealing with like years later in some form or another is really well done. And there's like several standout sequences. But there is this sort of recurring quirky, indie, awkward humor that kind of splices in, including from the main character. Well, I'm going to praise how she performs in like every scene that it calls upon her to act. I do think some of the dialogue in the doctor scene or wherever else does come off with that sort of quirkiness to it that doesn't quite land with me. So I think I am going to give it a 7.5. Which is as high as I can go before I flat out say it's great. But I think the things that I'm docking it for, like just I have to drag it under there. What's frustrating though is that I think the highs in this are higher than sentimental value for me. I think when this hits like a belter of a scene, I think it's one of the best scenes that I've seen in the last year in movies. There's just other things that are also dragging it down for me, which is why I think I give it that similar score, and I think I'm landing in the same number, but that was...
You gave it an 8.
Did I give sentimental value an 8?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think that's more consistent in that movie. I mean, I think that's ultimately why I rated that higher then. Whereas this one, I think there's peaks and there's lows, and this is where I'm landing. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. Just shy of the great because of the problems that I've discussed.
Okay. And then in terms of making the cut?
I mean, I think it's fair to say it makes the cut with a 7.5 and an 8.5.
I mean, I absolutely was going to put it there. I just wanted to see if like you had any reservations with the awkwardness.
Nah. It's still a good movie I'd recommend, because as well as things that turned me off a little bit here or there, it feels like an important movie for now. You know, and it's this sort of subject that every few years there's usually at least some good attempt at telling a version of this story from different perspectives, and I think that this is another valid one to throw into that mix. So
absolutely.
So that's Sorry Baby. Next time on Collector's Cut, we will be shifting over to a movie called The Mastermind. So that is what's coming next week on the show. And I know very little about this, if I'm honest. So that's kind of exciting.
Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix and Scientology, right?
That's The Master.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
He-Man goes to Eternia and fights against Skeletor.
I don't even know why that's a joke you're making, but is there something in He-Man called The Mastermind?
It's Masters of the Universe.
Oh, that was really a stretch then. I assumed it was something I didn't know. That's even worse.
How is Master and Masters of the Universe not? It's got the same thing there.
I
mean, it's a stretch by content. Of course, we're not doing He-Man, but yeah,
it was a little embarrassing. We're ending on a bit of a downer now. We'll see if David has redeemed himself by next week when we do The Mastermind.
Yeah, all right, Pete, tell us about Patreon.
Patreon.com/MilPlusTV. You can, of course, support us there, help keep the show coming, as well as our sci-fi show, The Atomic Cinema Experiment, as well as Streams After Midnight. But you get some bonus stuff if you want to help us out over there. You get access to the Ratings Rundown segments for each episode, both this and Ace, and you also get access to our monthly bonus show, Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies ever made. There's a couple of public episodes you can check out on YouTube, but the rest of them are all exclusive. There's one every month, and we have a whole variety of things in there, from more mainstream bad movies to weird, obscure, creepy little bad movies that you feel a bit dirty for watching, to everything in between. So if that sounds like fun and you want to hear us lose our goddamn minds, then you can do that over there. Also, YouTube membership's a valid alternative where a lot of these bonuses are also there too. Not everything, but most of the video content absolutely is. So anyway, that is the show. That's Collector's Cut. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.